Hi everyone, my name is Jill, and I just wanted to add a short clip here to explain that in my podcast with Rochelle, I had to edit and re record my audio. So at some points during the podcast, you might hear me in the background very faintly. However, I re recorded my parts around Rochelle's Zoom call so that you could hear me better. We hope you enjoy it. So today, for Professor Witt's fiction writing class, I'm going to be asking Rochelle questions in reference to her first story from the first assignment. My questions are going to focus on the dialogue and conversation within her story. With that being said, my first question for Rochelle is in reference to the model work that she selected. You used This Blessed House as a reference for how dialogue can be useful and impactful. So, what did you find most difficult in writing dialogue for your original characters so that it was natural but unique to their voice, all while also revealing crucial information to the story?
Well, hi, Jillian. It is absolutely great to be able to be here in this afternoon with you in this interview. And regarding the dialogue, when it came to writing my story, I really found myself inspired by The Blessed House because, again, there's a lot that's being revealed in one simple plot line of two characters moving into this house and finding Christian remnants and finding the opposites of that. Their voices are very prevalent. And for me, writing my story, I really found it difficult to be able to create a voice for Arthur, our protagonist, because if you guys notice, he does not speak at all. So he's not typically talking like other characters or his siblings in the story. He's really talking to us through his thoughts and through his inner sentiments. And in creating the voices for the brothers, I kind of wanted their voices to reveal details about their character alongside their actions. So I really had to change certain things around in revising my story when it came to certain dialogue between the two brothers, because there were certain scenes in the campfire that they would kind of have an argument. And in that argument, I had to change a lot of how the dialogue actually went to be able to say that there's problems between these brothers. But you could see in the dialogue that one character, which is Bryce, he's more impatient and he's more angry. He holds a lot more anger that's more openly expressed. But I had to change the dialogue to be able to show that he believes one way when it comes to being trapped in an island, while you have another brother, Oscar, who's more of an optimist. So he's the one that's always trying to bring the brothers together and be able to say that everything's going to work out and everything's good. But Bryce believes the opposite. So you have a conflict right there between difference of opinion. So having to kind of change around the dialogue, it was not easy in the beginning. It was kind of easy to kind of just make the brothers be really close in a difficult time. But I was challenged to say, where's the problem? Where's the conflict?
And my next question was, what was the most difficult aspect in writing dialogue for these characters while also giving each of them a distinct voice and personality? So, like you said, as you wrote about quadruplet brothers, each of them with their own voice or personality or opinions, all while they're in this very tense situation of being stuck on an island for so long, and try to let them all have their own way with words.
Right. It was interesting because it was difficult to add depth to each character without making it either too much or lose focus of the story. Because we, as the readers, we see that Arthur is the main character, and we're actually seeing the world through Arthur's eyes. So we are seeing the brothers and we are hearing the voices of the brothers, but we're also seeing how Arthur views the brothers too. It's more important to be able to show what Arthur goes through as the main character because he's the protagonist and he goes through certain things. You learn his story. And also the moments that Arthur's in his thoughts and we see interior thoughts that Arthur has. Also show parts of the brothers. I don't really show so much in the chapter that I sent out for this class compared to how much I show for Arthur. I don't show as much for the other brothers. So I kind of tried highlighting the voices of the brothers through dialogue that would be shown in the different scenes.
And I could definitely see from the first to the second final draft how you've changed the characters themselves. And for most people, it's hard enough to do one character, let alone four different people. But I think you did a really good job at honing in on that. And my third question was, when revising your draft, how has your dialogue changed during this process? Did you find yourself having to change the voices of these characters to better fit the story?
I had to change the dialogue a lot because one of the greatest criticisms that I actually got, it kind of influenced my writing a lot for the revision, was that the brothers were too good to each other. And that was a comment that was said to me by Professor Witt. And I did think about it. I was like, intentionally at first, I did make the brothers very good to each other because it's supposed to be like in the midst of a difficult time of being away from your parents, being a kid and being alone. You gotta have people to lean on, shoulders to lean on, and stick together. So I always kind of made all four of them have this positive and peachy relationship. But that's not really very realistic because everybody responds differently.
And my last question is, from this course, what is something that you've learned and how do you think it's made your writing different or better?
This is my second creative writing course that I'm taking since creative writing is my minor. And this class is more tailored in fiction writing, which is what I wanted because I started an introduction to creative writing, which is just a blend of everything to give you a taste of every field of writing to see which one kind of works for you. So this class in particular just really focused so much more on fiction writing. And in this class, I really learned a lot about how to kind of write a compelling story and showing instead of telling, because that was something that I would always hear about, but never really know what's the proper way to do it. And one thing that I myself have also noticed is that you and your story also did a lot of revisions in your work. In your story, I noticed that you ended up rearranging many details about our main protagonist and being able to see how you kind of present Connor as a character is very, very, very intriguing. What elements of Connor did you put in this story that helped to provide depth to his character? And what do we as the readers see in Connor that people in the story don't know about him?
So, when I was creating my character, I try my best to put myself in his shoes while also making my own realistic environment for him to be in and live in. In my drafts, since it is only a scene, I still wanted to show you his usual routine and what he does and doesn't like about it, and showing you how he interacts with things and people around him. I did try expanding this more through his dialogue, but personally, I find myself leaning toward more interiority kind of writing. And this is my last creative writing class, so I have had a lot of practice with different approaches to creative writing. So, my first drafts, I typically find myself writing a sort of outline for the story and what might happen. And then in future drafts, I do move things around a lot, like you pointed out.
Yeah, that's really great that you were able to do that. One thing that I noticed in your revised draft that you did is that you really used the setting to talk about who Connor is by you kind of make the employers in the cafe know exactly like what drink Connor likes or what
Mm-hmm.
table he specifically sits in the cafe because he sits there repetitively. He comes every day. Or you put that how he pays attention all the time to the cream that is sometimes put in the drink that he has in like his latte or how he looks outside and he sees the plants. Those details also help because we see what Connor values in his day-to-day routine. So in being able to kind of see the world in Connor's eyes, it's very helpful because then we could put
Mm-hmm.
ourselves in his shoes. And knowing that you worked hard in previous creative writing classes, that you're able to kind of map out and create diagrams and work prior to writing your story and putting your character together. I found that in your response to be very interesting. So I wanted to ask you in
Yeah.
relation to your selected craft, in creating Connor as a character, who are you inspired by? Is there like a particular person that you may have
Mm-hmm.
seen in different works of art or like in different movies or different books that made you think, I want to make Connor in this way? And, by making Connor the way that he is, what were you hoping the readers would learn about Connor in terms of who he is and what he is passionate about?
So, in creating Connor as a character, I generally start out with something I would or wouldn't do in my own life. So, for instance, I'm very much a creature of habit and someone who likes routine, even though I do enjoy straying away from routine from time to time. So, when something happens out of the ordinary, like when Kara comes up to Connor and talks to him, for him it's out of the ordinary and it's important because otherwise, if nothing happened, then there wouldn't be a story to write about. So while my story was condensed down into a scene, I was trying to think of a way for Connor to progress as a person and as a character.
I found myself relating to Connor a lot in this story because I too also share a lot of habits with Connor. I myself am also an introvert. I also wanted to
Mm-hmm.
ask you that what other changes did you make in Connor's character based on the feedback that you may have received from either your professor or your peers too? So being able to hear feedback from your professor and your peers, how did that help you in changing your story in the end to make it what it is now?
So whenever I revise something, I usually will ask some friends to look over it for me because sometimes I feel like when I'm looking at my work for so long that I might miss something. It's like the most glaring error discrepancies. So in my first draft, I had a few factual elements that didn't fit or were incorrect, so I ended up just chopping those out. They weren't facts or anything that were crucial to the story and the characters. And the professor recommended, and I think some students, to start the story in media res or in the middle of the action. So that was the major change I made for the better.
Yeah, I mean, for revisions, they always sometimes say that like less is best, especially
Mm-hmm.
if what you may have had originally will not get us to where we need to be in the story. We'll be like, what's the point? Yeah, there's always something to take away from writing, and that's something that I appreciate. And I take that with me going into future classes, because you're putting yourself in different kinds of writing that you can explore. Then I applaud you for applying all of the feedback that was given, that was both positive in terms of praise, but also criticism that was very constructive. I am sure that just like I have something to take away from this course, I know that you do as well, especially because this is your last class as you're graduating. Congratulations. And
Thank you.
now that you're kind of wrapping up your last creative writing class for the semester, what do you take away from fiction writing that you may not have done before, but you do now? And what you will continue to do? What will you continue to do in the
Right.
future if you were to keep writing? What is your takeaway?
So, my biggest takeaway is that it's helpful and a good practice to put yourself in the character's shoes and their world, and in some cases, less is more. So, while revising, I had lesser moving parts in my story, but I really tried to expand on what I had to make a better focus and action of the characters. I also find it easier personally to write more to begin with and take away from it than to start short and try to add on to it. So my revising process really helped me to hone in on the parts that should be focused on, and even some of the chapters that I glanced over helped with different technical terms like interiority and others, and how to actually use those properly and to your advantage.
So I
Yes,
thank you,
definitely.
Jillian, for joining me in this podcast. And I thank you as well for inviting me to be able to also ask me questions.
Likewise, and thank you so much for being a great partner for this project. And you were really kind and you did a really good job.